April 1945. In a requisitioned German schoolhouse outside Augsburg, an SS officer laid a pistol on an interrogation table and pointed it at a U.S. Army captain. The war was almost over. The killing was not. Then an American general opened the door and sat down. The prisoner's name was Otto Reimann. On paper, he was an SS Sturmbannführer, assigned to security police operations in occupied territory. In the field, men like Reimann did the work Germany later tried to describe with clean language: evacuations, reprisals, anti-partisan sweeps, resettlement actions. The reports used tidy words. The ground did not. Villages east of Lublin, farm roads in the Zamość district, cellars in the Vosges. Names entered into ledgers after the people attached to them had already disappeared. By the time American troops found Reimann near a damaged rail siding, he had not changed into civilian clothes. He had not shaved his head. He had not burned his papers. He stood in a field gray coat with the insignia partly stripped away, as if removing two pieces of cloth could turn command into coincidence. That was his first performance. He gave his name before anyone asked. He gave his rank in a steady voice. He presented himself as a professional soldier who had been captured by professional soldiers, not a fugitive, not a murderer. A man protected, he hoped, by the same military rules he had spent years denying to everyone beneath him. The Americans did not argue with him in the road. They searched him, took his belt, took his sidearm, took the knife from his boot, and placed him in the back of a truck with 2 guards and 3 other prisoners. What they did not know was that Reimann had been planning his surrender for days. Not escape, something more precise. He had kept a small document case with him, a black leather case cracked along the handle and stuffed with transfer papers, fuel receipts, and false personnel lists. The case had been searched in the field, badly. The soldiers had shaken it, opened the flap, pulled out the papers, and found nothing that looked like a weapon. They missed the loose panel beneath the lining. Behind that panel was a Walther PPK, oiled, loaded, and small enough to vanish under 2 fingers of leather. At the schoolhouse, Captain Daniel Mercer sat across from him. Mercer was 28 years old, thin from field rations, with a pencil tucked behind one ear and a stack of captured German paperwork on the table. Beside the window stood Lieutenant Paul Hanley, arms folded, watching the prisoner more than the papers. The room still looked like a classroom if you ignored the map pins, a blackboard on one wall, children's arithmetic half erased in chalk, a cracked globe in the corner, mud on the floorboards from American boots. War had moved into a place built for children to learn multiplication. Mercer began with the usual questions: name, rank, unit, last posting, commanding officer. Reimann answered all of it cleanly, not warmly, not nervously, cleanly. He knew the rhythm of an interrogation because he had conducted enough of them himself. He understood when to answer quickly, when to pause, when to look insulted, when to pretend confusion. Then Mercer opened a folder tied with cotton string. The mood changed. Inside were witness statements taken from 2 Polish laborers who had survived a clearance operation by hiding under cut timber beside a road. There was a captured vehicle log from July 1943. It was a field order with Reimann's initials in the margin. It was a railway inventory showing ammunition issued to his detachment 3 days before an entire village vanished from German records. Mercer did not raise his voice. He only moved the papers closer. "Tell me about July 17th. Reimann blinked once. Not fear. Calculation. He said he had no memory of the date. Mercer showed him the vehicle log. Reimann said many officers used the same route. Mercer showed him the field order. Reimann said initials were not proof. Mercer named the village. Reimann's face hardened. Not because the name surprised him, because it did not. For the first time, Mercer understood that the man in front of him was not denying knowledge. He was measuring how much knowledge the Americans had. So Mercer gave him one more piece. A survivor had remembered Ryman's horse, a dark mare with a white blaze on the nose, the kind of detail no report would contain unless somebody had seen him there. Ryman looked down at the document case on the table. His right hand moved.
Hanley saw it half a second too late. The flap opened, the leather panel bent back. Ryman's fingers came out with the small pistol, and suddenly the classroom became a room full of stillness. The barrel settled on Mercer's chest. Hanley's hand drifted toward his holster, but Ryman shifted the pistol just enough to stop him. "No," Ryman said. His English was accented but clear. "No more questions." Mercer did not move. He could see the dark circle of the barrel, and beyond it, Ryman's eyes, narrow and alive for the first time since the interview began. The prisoner had found the one language he still trusted: fear. Outside the room, Brigadier General Elias Hart was supposed to be leaving. Hart had come to the schoolhouse for a different matter. A captured engineer accused of ordering bridge charges left under a civilian crossing. He'd finished that review 15 minutes earlier and was standing in the corridor with his aide arguing over fuel priority for 2 armored reconnaissance companies. Hart was 51, broad-shouldered, exhausted, and famous among his own men for never raising his voice when everyone else was losing theirs. He had been shelled in Tunisia, pinned by machine gun fire in Normandy, and thrown from a command jeep outside Metz hard enough to crack 2 ribs. He walked with a small stiffness in cold weather and hated anyone noticing. That afternoon, he noticed something first. Through the narrow glass panel in the classroom door, he saw the geometry of the room had changed. Mercer too still, Hanley too careful. The prisoner leaning forward, a hand extended where no hand should be. Hart stopped speaking. His aide followed his eyes and reached for the guard posted down the corridor. Hart lifted one finger. Not yet. Then he opened the door. Ryman's head turned. The pistol did not. For one long second, nobody spoke. Hart looked at the prisoner, then at the gun, then back at the prisoner. He closed the door behind him, quietly. That was the first thing Mercer remembered for the rest of his life. Not the general entering, not the pistol. The way he closed the door as if he had walked into a meeting that had become inconvenient, not fatal. Hart wore a plain field jacket over his uniform. His helmet was tucked under his left arm. His own pistol remained in its holster. He did not shout for guards. He did not dive. He did not draw. He pulled out the empty chair beside Mercer and sat down. The legs of the chair scraped over the floorboards like thunder. Ryman stared at him. Hart placed his helmet on the table. Then he said, "Major, your plan is late." Ryman said nothing. Hart leaned back as if he had all the time in Germany. "You needed this room before the war ended," he said. "You needed confusion. You needed uniforms still moving, front minds still bending, men still afraid to write things down. But it is April now. Your army is breaking. Your papers are captured. Your witnesses are alive." He looked at the pistol. "Your gun arrived after the decision had already been made." Ryman's jaw tightened. The pistol stayed on Mercer. Hart's voice did not change. "You are thinking one of 3 things. You can kill Captain Mercer, you can make us negotiate, or you can make yourself important for a few more minutes." He leaned forward slightly. "Only one of those things is true." Hanley did not breathe. Mercer could feel sweat under his collar. Hart kept talking. "If you fire, the guards outside come through that door. Maybe they kill you before you raise the pistol again. Maybe they do not.
Either way, the next document in your file becomes very simple. He murdered an American officer during a war crimes interview. The room seemed to shrink around the words. Ryman's eyes flicked toward the door. Hart saw it. "Good," he said. "You still understand doors."
That line almost broke something in Ryman's face. Not anger exactly. Insult. He had been used to making other men watch entrances and exits. He had been used to owning the room. Now a general had walked in, sat down, and spoken to him like a clerk correcting a form. Ryman said, "You do not know who I am." Hart's expression did not move. "I know exactly what you are trying to be," he said. "That is not the same thing." The pistol shifted toward Hart. For the first time, the barrel left Mercer's chest. Mercer should have felt relief. He did not. Hart was sitting less than 6 feet from the muzzle. The general looked at the gun as though Ryman had placed a broken compass on the table. "I have seen artillery turn men into shadows," Hart said. "I have seen tanks burn with boys still inside them. I have heard men call for their mothers in 3 languages. So listen carefully. That little pistol is real. But it is not large enough to change what you did." Ryman's knuckles whitened. Hart lowered his voice. "You are not holding power. You are holding a decision, and the longer you hold it, the smaller it gets." No one moved. Outside, boots sounded faintly at the end of the corridor, then stopped. Hart continued. "If you put it down, you are still a prisoner. You still have lawyers, you still have a tribunal, you still have whatever lies you think can survive paper, witnesses, and time. If you fire, you become a dead man before the ink dries." Ryman swallowed. It was the first human sound he had made. Hart saw that too. "You built your life on rooms where everyone else was afraid," he said. "This is not one of those rooms." Mercer would later say that was the moment the pistol changed weight. It did not lower yet, but the weapon was no longer commanding the room. It was being judged by it. Ryman looked at Mercer, then at Hanley, then at Hart. The calculation had not vanished. Men like Ryman did not stop calculating, but the numbers had turned against him. He had expected panic. Instead, he had an American general sitting beside his target explaining the arithmetic of his own death. The pistol dipped an inch. Hart said nothing. Another inch. Then the gun touched the table. No one lunged for it. That mattered. Hart reached across slowly, turned the pistol so the barrel faced the wall, and slid it to his side of the table. Only then did he stand. He picked up his helmet. He looked at Mercer. "Ask the next question." Then he walked out. The interrogation continued for almost 4 hours. Not cleanly, not like confession in a courtroom drama. Ryman did not suddenly become honest because a brave man had embarrassed him. He lied, he minimized, he blamed dead superiors. He turned orders into misunderstandings and murder into logistics. But something essential had been taken from him. Before the gun, he controlled silence. After the gun, silence belonged to the Americans. Mercer understood that and used it. He did not rush. He returned to July 17th. He returned to the horse with the white blaze. He returned to the ammunition inventory, the vehicle log, the field order with the initials Ryman claimed meant nothing. Then Henley asked about a second village. Ryman corrected the pronunciation without thinking. That was the first crack. Mercer wrote it down. Henley asked who commanded the truck column. Ryman gave a rank before catching himself. Second crack. Mercer wrote that down too. By nightfall, they had 3 names they had not possessed that morning,
2 dates that matched captured rail records, and the location of a supply barn where files had been hidden before the retreat. Not enough to resurrect the dead, enough to make denial harder.
In the weeks that followed, investigators found more. A stack of fuel requests signed under a false unit designation. A requisition form for ammunition issued on the wrong side of the front. A clerk who remembered being told to change casualty language from civilians to bandit supporters. A German driver who had spent 2 years pretending he had only moved crates. The case widened. Ryman was transferred out of the schoolhouse under heavier guard. His document case was tagged as evidence. The Walther was sealed in a brown envelope with Mercer's handwriting across the flap. The story did not enter official reports the way soldiers later told it. Official reports preferred verbs that could be defended: entered, secured, removed, continued. They did not know what to do with a general who saw a pistol and answered it by sitting down. So the story traveled where official stories always fail to stay contained, through drivers, through clerks, through guards smoking in doorways. By the next week, some versions had Hart knocking the gun out of Ryman's hand. Others had him daring the SS officer to shoot. One version put a tank outside the window, which was impossible and therefore immediately popular. But every version kept the part that mattered. Hart did not draw his weapon, Hart sat down, and the gun went down first. Ryman's tribunal began the following year. The courtroom was smaller than the crimes it tried to hold. Witnesses spoke through interpreters. Documents moved from table to table. Men who had once signed orders in offices now argued over grammar, distance, chain of command, military necessity. The defense said Ryman had followed orders. The records said he had given them. The defense said the operations were anti-partisan measures. The witness statements described children, old men, and farm families with no weapons in their hands. The defense said memory could be unreliable. Then Mercer's folder entered the room. Dates, routes, fuel, ammunition, names. Not emotion, structure. That was what trapped Ryman in the end. Not one heroic moment in a schoolhouse, not one speech from one general. Paper, witnesses, time, the slow machinery of proof. He was convicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity by an Allied tribunal in occupied Germany. The sentence was death. When the clerk read it, Ryman looked less like a soldier than he had on the day of his capture. He looked like a man who had run out of rooms to control. He left no final statement worth recording. Captain Daniel Mercer went home to Ohio after the war. He married. He sold farm equipment for a while, then worked claims for an insurance company. He kept his papers neat, his shoes polished, and his war stories mostly to himself. His children knew he had been overseas. They knew he had interrogated German prisoners. They knew there were certain questions that made him look out a window for a long time before answering. But on the wall of his small study, above a metal filing cabinet, he kept a newspaper clipping with General Hart's photograph, not framed elegantly, just pinned behind glass. When his youngest son finally asked why, Mercer stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at it for a long time. "He did not save my life," Mercer said. His son did not understand. Mercer looked back at the photograph. The man might not have fired. He might have. I spent years not knowing which one was true. Then he tapped the glass once. What Hart did was different. He walked into the room and took away the only thing that pistol was good for. His son asked what that was. Mercer answered softly. Fear. General Elias Hart lived long enough to see victory parades and speeches about courage. He disliked most of them.
Men who had been under fire rarely trusted clean language about bravery. It made danger sound decorative.
Hart knew better. He knew fear was real. He had felt it in ditches, in command cars, in farmhouses with maps spread across doors because there were no tables left. He knew a pistol at 6 feet was not a symbol. It was a piece of machinery designed to end a human life. He did not sit down because he thought the gun was harmless. He sat down because he understood what Ryman needed the gun to become. A crown, a command, a way to make everyone in the room obey the old rules. But the old rules were dying outside that schoolhouse. Germany was collapsing road by road. Records were being seized. Survivors were finding voices. Men who had ruled by terror were discovering that terror had an expiration date. So Hart gave the pistol nothing to feed on. No panic, no shouting. No scramble, no stage, only a chair, a table, and a choice, shrinking by the second. The pistol had been meant to command the room. Hart made the room command the pistol.